I think we have some good news, slightly.
Yeah, good news. I would temper my enthusiasm for this a little bit more than what some of the media coverage has been. So we got a couple of notable Supreme Court decisions yesterday. I'm covering one of them in my monologue, which is everybody coming together to give away the store to Goldman Sachs to make sure they can be held accountable for any of their crimes during the financial crisis. We'll get into that one in a second. They did do something modestly good here, though, in a case involving the NCAA. So I'm sure a lot of you have been following this sort of back and forth of the NCAA is basically like a racket and a monopoly that completely abuses their workers, which are the players, right? Especially in lucrative sports like basketball and football. NCAA raking in billions in viewership fees to the television networks. And meanwhile, they're very adamant about, we have to protect the purity, integrity of the sport and amateur competition, as if this is some virtuous thing that they're doing, even though they themselves can't really even define what it means to be an amateur. They've changed the definition over the years. So I'm going to read here a little bit from Vox. Yesterday, the Supreme Court handed down a heavily caveated victory for elite college athletes on Monday. The immediate impact of the court's unanimous decision, 9-0, in NCAA versus Alston is that many elite student athletes will receive additional education-related compensation, such as additional scholarship money. But the case could have broader implications and could eventually lead to these athletes being paid salary. So let me break down for you what that means. The question in this case that they decided to rule on was not whether these athletes could be compensated for playing their sport. The question was this one that they made very narrow around this question of additional educational scholarship
like limited
benefits. Right. So this isn't about receiving payment. This was about sort of like scholarships and educational scholarships, essentially. And this is one of the hallmarks of the Roberts Court in this era is he has really tried to sort of cabin these decisions to be as narrow as possible, because I think what a lot of court watchers feel is that he recognizes the credibility of the Supreme Court and the structure of the Supreme Court as it stands is very much at risk right now. So he's trying not to make a lot of waves. And he's trying to have as many decisions as possible where it's not just the conservatives overriding the liberals. So that's how you get a decision like this, where they very narrowly rule on this very specific question about education scholarships, but it's unanimous. And what's giving people hope that this could lead to more dramatic changes is in the opinion as it was written, I think by Gorsuch, actually. He essentially said, look, we're not ruling on the larger compensation piece because you didn't specifically ask us to, but maybe you should try again and see what happens.
Actually, so what's also interesting here was Justice Kavanaugh, and here's what he wrote, quote, "Nowhere else in America can businesses get away with agreeing not to pay their workers a fair market rate on the theory that the product is defined by not paying their workers a fair market rate," adding, quote, "And under ordinary principles of antitrust law, it is not evident why college sports should be any different. The NCAA is not above the law." And so just to recoup, remember, what they have said is that students who play sports as amateurs should not be getting paid because they should not be getting paid because the amateur nature of the sport, which would corrupt it and make it so that these rules, are cross-subsidized and it would make it unfair, etc. Now, maybe there was something to that in like 1960, but right now it's totally ridiculous. Just to give you guys insight, like I'm from College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M is. Football is the lifeblood of that town. Whenever they moved to the SEC, I think over $1 billion of new revenue came in to College Station. And I remember Johnny Football and Johnny Manziel and all that. The guy single-handedly, I think, brought in hundreds of millions of dollars into the town itself, and he wasn't making a dime. Many of the stars that I've seen come through College Station in my entire lifetime were not compensated until at least some of them went to the NFL. Some of them, like Johnny, didn't end up doing so well, even when they got there. But the point is that their time and the amount of economic and social benefit that they were bringing to the towns was immense, and they were being profited off of by the NCAA and by many of these schools who can sell merchandise and who can see huge additions to their endowments, to their bottom lines, if they invest in stadiums and like all this other stuff, but which the students don't get any of. And it's just a fundamental question of fairness that we've seen in like the video games industry in terms of how their likenesses are used, in terms of how much they're profited off of. It is just totally unfair. And I think the fact that Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch both put in like little caveats there inviting it, that's kind of the more interesting part here. I think what a lot of the court watchers saw, and this was the lead in the New York Times story as well, is that it underscored that it basically invited a new case.
Right.
So it may take a couple of years, but at least in the current composition of the court, I would say that things are looking pretty good for college athletes. And I think that's the way that it should be. It's not fair to let these schools make billions of dollars on the backs of these kids, and they don't get to make a dime.
Again, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we've had all these big decisions over the years that people thought were definitely going to go this way or definitely going to go that way. And, ACB's definitely going to rule against Obamacare because she said this or that in the past. Or, how long have people who really care a lot about abortion rights on either side of that debate, either pro or against, how long have they thought this is going to be the one and we're reading the tea leaves and it doesn't come to fruition? Roberts, the hallmark of Roberts has been to be extremely, extremely cautious and not to make any big sweeping decisions with massive ramifications, which is what we're talking about here. But to talk about like the morality of it and the actual, situation that college athletes are facing, they not only should they be compensated, they should also be able to unionize.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
this is the other thing. And I mean, I was a college athlete, as I was a swimmer, though it wasn't like one of these sports where there's actually lucrative and
like money involved.
Yeah. So, but I did have a firsthand experience of just how much control they have over your life, right? I mean, you're there supposedly as a student first, but your sport really controls every aspect of your day. They have entire control over even what times you're studying and whether you're required to go to study hall. You have these like academic counselors. Obviously your schedule in terms of when you're at the gym and what your training regimen looks like. And all of those things, even when you can have classes and when you can't have classes, much more control over your life when you're an NCAA athlete than I would say almost any other, certainly like profession, because they truly have rules that govern every single aspect of your life. So to me, it's not just about the compensation. It's also like players should be able to have a say in what those rules are and what the limitations are and how their days and their schedules are governed. Because again, if you're trying to balance a rigorous academic schedule with your sport, sometimes that's made nearly impossible by the requirements that they put on top of you. So I think that piece also needs to not be overlooked. The fact that it's not just about players should be profiting off of their skills and their talents that the NCAA is exploiting for massive, massive profits, but they also should have a say in what their employment looks like, essentially, from on a day-to-day basis.
Actually, this reminds me, there's actually currently a bill in Congress which was introduced by Bernie and by Chris Murphy. I remember reading about this at the time, which would actually allow college athletes to form unions and become employees. Coincidentally, of course, the NCAA has been lobbying hard against it. And this is actually something which they have tried to push through several times. And college football players, I know last year in particular, were really beginning to talk a little bit about this, and there's at least a little bit of momentum behind it. But of course, the NCAA is throwing everything they possibly can against this. They really are a cartel. I mean, the way Justice Kavanaugh is writing about it, it's true. It's like you can't define your industry as one which makes money by not paying its employees. It's BS. And it's basically what it is, right?
Yeah.
Let's boil it down.
Imagine Amazon being like, they just, for the love of the warehouse work.
They're getting trained. This is apprenticeship. It's like slavery. Literally, it's like modern forms of, obviously not the same thing as chattel slavery, okay? So don't anybody go and quote that. But indentured servitude and all of that had its own very ugly parts in early American history and in Europe. And I think that there's a lot to be said about what's happening.
And by the way, we always focus on the stars who then go on to the NBA, go on to the NFL. The overwhelming majority of these athletes are not going to be making it to the next level. This is it for them.
I think it's like 3%.
Yeah,
probably,
this is it for them in terms of their career, their athletic career, and they deserve to be paid commensurate with the profits that are being made off of them for their skills and their labor.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Krystal, what are your breaking points today?
Well.